Welcome to this special Storytelling Podcast Week live interview today. We are so grateful that you're joining us, and we're joined by some very special guests here today. So we're going to give it a minute for everyone to join live and join us from YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere people are joining us live. And if you are watching the replay, just know that you'll be available. The replay is available to watch. So we'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone to this special live stream from Podbean and Storytelling Podcast Week. For everyone joining us here live and for the replay, we're joined today by Yuriy Matsarsky and Stevie Manns. Yuri is a Ukrainian journalist based in Kyiv who has spent the majority of his career covering war zones and has teamed up with Stevie Manns, a podcast consultant and producer based out of the US, to create the podcast Fighting for Ukraine that documents Yuri's daily experience on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. And they've been gracious enough to join us live here today to speak about Yuri's experience on the front lines and documenting the situation and realities on the ground. So hello and welcome, Yuriy Matsarsky and Stevie Manns.
Hello, and thank you very much for interest in our affairs. Thank you very much for all you have done for Ukraine to help us in our fight. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so Yuri, for those of us watching around the world, tell us a little bit about what's happening for you right now.
Right now, I'm serving as a soldier, as a private soldier, in a territorial defense unit. Almost a month ago, tomorrow it will be, the month I decided to join. It was the second day of the war. I volunteered to join the territorial defense units. It's a part of the Ukrainian armed force. It's meant by people who were the civilians, who have no military experience or have been in the army years ago. So there are no real profit servicemen in these units. They're managed only by men and women with peaceful background. So a month ago, I was a journalist. But now, for almost a month without one day, I'm a soldier in this unit. We have some kind of training. We have, I've already get my uniform. First a couple of weeks, I was wearing only civilian. We don't need to. There is no, any order to wear uniform. No any order to wear military boots. We have only one order: is to have our rifles always with us. Now I have my rifle with me and my uniform with me, and our platoon is already involved in a standoff with Russians in one of Kyiv suburbs. So we have some kind of rotation. So one of our comrades is guarding streets of Kyiv, and at the same time our comrades is serving on the front lines, protecting the professional servicemen from the attacks from the rear and from the flanks. So very soon it would be also my turn to go to this suburb. It would be my turn to face Russian directly.
Wow. Okay. And it sounds like your unit, like you mentioned, people in your unit had different jobs a month ago. I mean, you were a journalist. What are some of the other jobs that the people in your direct unit previously did?
I can tell you. First of all, I joined the territorial defense units with my colleague. We have, before the war, we have had our own daily radio show. Yeah. So we worked together for a couple of years. And we both joined the territorial defense units. We both, volunteered to go to the army. We also have in our unit the guy who is one of the most famous Ukrainian playwrights of modern times. We have some kind of very interesting story about him. One of the largest United States magazine. I don't remember. Was it New Yorker or something like that? Because, it was 3 weeks ago or something like that. Discovered that this guy, the writer, the playwright, he's serving as a private in one of the platoons. So guys from from this magazine called us, telephoned us, and said to us, "Oh, we really want to talk to Max. Can you please manage? We have a guy who is working for us in Kyiv, and he really wants to meet with Max and to make an interview with him, to make some photos of him. Can you please bring Max to this guy to talk to us?" And I came to Max. I told him, "Hey, the guys from New Yorker is trying to find you. They want to make an interview with you. They want to make some kind of huge article about your experience." He's writing right now. He's writing some kind script for theater script about our platoon. This guy. So, and
Wow.
he was standing, he was guarding, the doors, the gates of our platoon, and he said, "Oh, I don't know if I can go because I need to stay here. I need to guide our comrades. I need to protect them. So maybe after my duty, maybe after that, I can go to talk to someone who came from United States to talk with me." So we have this kind of guy in a neighboring platoon, the positions which had the position close to us. We have, for example, the guy who was the counselor of one of the ministers
Okay.
of the Ukrainian government, and he's the clown guy who was a clown. And he was a clown. He's from a circus family. So
So a
his
clown from a
parents,
circus. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have a young girl who was a biologist in the peacetime. We have a girl who was a makeup artist before the war.
Wow. Okay.
We have in our platoon the guy who was a millionaire. He's a businessman. He was a millionaire, real millionaire with millions of dollars. So
Yeah.
a lot of people from very different backgrounds,
Yeah.
with very different origins. So we have Ukrainians, we have Russians in our platoon, we have some Crimean Tatars in our platoon, the people from different religious backgrounds, from
Yeah.
that's some kind of Ukraine in miniature. No, but that's because hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands at least, people volunteered to join territorial defense units.
Wow.
Very
Yeah,
different
wow.
people.
No, that's incredible. So it really sounds like it's such an array of people from, the span of what a society has, right? Like someone who works in the civil government. You're a journalist, a playwright, a makeup artist, a professional clown from a circus. Like it's really it's really kind of a really mixed group in your platoon, and I think that really is representative of how the Ukrainian people have come together in this moment to fight for Ukraine. And many people are saying that the Ukrainian people have truly risen to the historic moment in defending your country, you know, in so many ways. So as a Ukrainian, what are you most proud of as a Ukrainian?
You see, first of all, of course, I'm proud of my people. I'm proud of
Yeah.
of all these internal borders disappeared immediately
Yeah.
right after the war. There is no any any thoughts, any fights because of of political views. There
Yeah.
is no any differences in religion. There is no right now. There is no any differences even in language. It's really painful question. I'm so sorry. It's really painful question in Ukraine for a long time. The question, the language question. Now it's gone. Oh, we have, as I told you already, we became some kind, of not even the one family. We became one huge military unit. Yeah,
Wow.
whole Ukraine, men, women, older, younger, all of us we
Yeah.
became one huge military unit.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing that. It's wow. I think when people see what's on the news, it doesn't really capture all the time the human aspect of it and how people's lives, which were so full, even a month ago with pedestrian things, right? Of the day to day. that everyone really has come together for one purpose and with one mission, and that's to defend the country. So it's really incredible. And just also for people who may be listening and that don't have context, in the past you mentioned there was like a language question of maybe which language people were using. What are the languages that people are using on the ground?
Of course, we have only one language, which is state language. It's Ukrainian language.
Yeah.
But historically, a lot of people in eastern part of Ukraine and in central part of Ukraine, historically, there are a lot of Russian-speaking persons, you know, and the presence of the Russian-speaking persons, Russia used as excuse for, you know, for intruding in our local affairs, in our in our deals. So for a long time, you know, it was some kind of we have a lot of pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine, for pro-Russian parties. Of course, we're in such of, you know, of decline right now, but no one cares what kind of language do you speak right now. No one cares if you are, you know, if you are talking Russian or Ukrainian, because we have much more important things right now to do. We have much more, you know, much more difficult, much more bloody things to do right now than to argue about what language do you need to use or what language do you don't need to use.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for providing that context. I think people outside of the immediate region don't understand a lot of the nuances culturally that have been a large part of the country, you know, as a whole and in its history. In terms of people who aren't in Ukraine, what do you wish everyone outside of Ukraine to know about what's going on?
I would like to say to you that, you know, we are facing the real genocide. We are facing the real genocide, like it was, you know, I can compare it to the genocide of Bosnian people during the war after the collapse of Yugoslavia. I've been in Sarajevo. Maybe some of our listeners and viewers also been there. Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in the center of this, it's one of the most beautiful cities of the world. Believe me, it's really beautiful city, and every park, every green alley in this beautiful city is full of graves. You know, people are literally walking. You know, kids are literally running. Couples are literally kissing each other on the graveyard, you know, because everywhere is graves. It's because the Sarajevo for almost 4 years was under siege. So the people who lived there, they don't have access to any graveyards, to any real graveyards, to bury their beloved ones, to bury their children, their parents. So they just, you know, they just dig graves where they found some place to bury their loved ones. So exactly the same is now happening in a few cities and towns of Ukraine. As exactly the same is right now, while we are talking to you, is happening, for example, in Mariupol. Mariupol, it's a city in Donbass. It's Donbass region. It's on the shore of Azov Sea, and it's destroyed by Russian rockets and Russian bombs. It's almost completely destroyed. And you know, just today I saw a picture, you know, of a note of some of the family members to other family members from Mariupol. And this person wrote by hand, you know, person wrote, the mother died at the beginning of March. I couldn't find the place to bury her except for a kids' playground near the school. And after that, you know, after all these words, there was a scheme where to find the grave.
Right. Wow.
You can you imagine it?
Wow.
So these people who are telling you and telling us that they come here to protect us from some kind of Nazis or something like this, they are killing civilians people right now. So civilians in Ukraine, when it was in Sarajevo, all the people said, "Oh, it's impossible to see. It really was terrible, horrible story." But it this story is repeating right now
Yeah.
because world don't teach this lesson very carefully, and we are facing the same. They're trying to erase Ukraine and Ukrainians. They don't want us to exist at all. So as Putin wrote in his mad bloody articles, that there is no such a thing like Ukrainian nation, there is no such a thing like Ukrainians. In his eyes and in the eyes of a bloody majority of Russians, we are not real, we're not real nation, we are not real people. We are some kind of misguided Russians who need to
Right.
be returned
No.
under Russian rule or destroyed.
Yeah, and I think being in the West, I think we've heard some of that from that side, and it's definitely something where being in Ukraine on the ground while that's happening, and not even being able to bury your dead is, as you mentioned, really a human rights. Yeah, it's really a moment. You mentioned also being in Sarajevo for the conflict that happened there and being a journalist on the ground. So in terms of seeing a similar situation in your own home country, and this question, I mean, please answer how you feel, but has it provided you any additional insight or skills in terms of being able to communicate what's going on?
I've been in Sarajevo after the war. I've I've been in Sarajevo after decade. Yeah, it was decade after the war. But
Yeah,
I've been at other wars. I've been in Syria. I've been
yeah,
in Iraq, in Kyrgyzstan, in Gaza Strip, and of course I have some kind of experience working in such of condition. And I want to tell you what I've been in Iraq, in Mosul, during the offensive on this Mosul, while Mosul was in the hands of ISIS. So it was, a little bit like a world war, because very
right,
different nations were in advance capturing and freeing, liberating Mosul from ISIS. We were guys from United States, we were local Kurds and Arabs, we were guys even from Canada, from New Zealand. So all the world were fighting against the ISIS, and of course, ISIS was also multinational forces in Mosul. And
right,
when this offensive began, uh, I was with one of a platoon of the Kurds who were advancing right on the highway. They were advancing through the highway to the Mosul. So when it was clearly that offensive is now, it's began, and it's clear that the fighting will, for Mosul will start soon. ISIS led, I think not all, but a lot of civilians left Mosul and suburbs of Mosul. So I saw thousands of refugees who managed to flee Mosul and its surroundings.
yeah,
Russians are doing not the same. They're doing the opposite. They are using civilians first of all as some kind of living shield, and they also they are making sieges. They are targeting civilian districts. They are targeting schools. They are targeting hospitals,
right,
including maternity hospitals. Uh, 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine from Kharkiv, who was a historian in previous time, he said to me that for only 2 weeks of war, Russia destroyed more buildings, civilian buildings in Kharkiv for only 2 weeks, more than Nazis destroyed during the whole Second World War.
Wow.
And now, it was 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
2 weeks later, right now, the number of destroyed buildings in Kharkiv doubled. You see? So for a month of the war, they destroyed twice more buildings in Kharkiv than Nazis did during the whole Second World War. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
My parents lived under constant rocket fire and constant artillery shells in Kharkiv for more than a week since the war began. They spent a week without electricity, without water, without anything, and under constant fire. So they don't have any opportunity even to leave the flat and to go to subway station where the shelter was located.
Wow. Okay. So it's definitely different with the targeting of civilians on the ground. I'll just reintroduce you briefly. For everyone who's joined live and watching the replay, we're joined here today by Yuriy Matsarsky and Stevie Manns. Yuri is a Ukrainian journalist based in Kyiv who spent the majority of his career covering war zones and has teamed up with Stevie Manns, a podcast consultant and producer out of the US, to create the podcast Fighting for Ukraine. And that documents Yuri's daily experience on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. So they're joined here today for this special live stream for Storytelling Podcast Week. I want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about Fighting for Ukraine, because you've been able to document the on-the-ground experience that you've had from March 9th, from very early in what's been going on, and to share daily with people around the world in the form of a podcast about what's been going on. So, and this question, Stevie, I'd love if you jumped in as well. What was the Fighting for Ukraine, the podcast, like, in such short notice, creating a show, and honestly, I think of it almost like a living narrative, as you are sharing daily what's been going on. What was the impetus to create a podcast from what's going on the ground, and how did it all come together so quickly? Yeah, Stevie, let's start with you, and then Yuri, jump in.
Okay.
So Yuri sent an email, I think it was actually March 9th, to a group of audio producers and consultants, and said, "Hello, my name is Yuri. Only 2 weeks ago I was a journalist, but now I'm defending the army in Ukraine from Russian aggression. I'm open for interviews, commentaries, and I'm happy to collaborate to report on what's going on in Ukraine currently." Excuse me. He said, "I have a notebook and a recorder, and I really want to record and write things all around me every day to be published for a Western audience." And as a podcast producer, I looked at that and said, this is a daily podcast. This is what it can be. And I responded to Yuri probably within about an hour of him sending it and said, "I think this is a podcast. Do you want to do it?"
Yeah.
And Yuri was so receptive. And I'm so grateful for the trust that he put in me to go, yeah, okay, go for this. And we suggested a couple of names. I came up with the cover, and Yuri just said, "Yep, that's great." He sent me the first episode, and we managed to have it published and up on Apple within about 6 hours of this initial conversation, which I think, if anyone's produced and published a podcast, to get it up on Apple within 6 hours, that's a feat.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for those of you who are joining us live, this is actually, I think, the first time you two are connecting on video chat. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, incredible. And I think it's something where, as being on the other side of the world, it can be something where we all want to help or give back. And the way that, you were able to contribute was really to work with Yuri on this podcast. So incredible. And Yuri, how did it come together from your end? I mean, how did you reached out to a group of podcast producers in New York, but how did the idea to format your experience in a podcast come together?
For a week of my life, I've been just a soldier. I don't have for a whole week. I don't have any experience in working as a journalist and talking to my foreign colleagues. it was before some of our commanders discovered that in his platoon he have guys who had been a journalist, So my first week in the army was a normal week. I was manning, the checkpoints. I was patrolling the street, but
Yeah.
suddenly our local commander ran to me with a huge white eyes opened, and he was pale, as a paper. And he said, "What did you done? What have you done?" I said, "I don't know. We wanted to see in the headquarters." So he took me to the headquarters, and we discovered that some of our commanders in the headquarters, he was my listener while I was, a radio anchor. And he said, "Oh, you have here, we have here my favorite radio anchors, Yuri and Pablo. I want you to be in touch with foreign journalists who comes to Ukraine, who comes to Kyiv, to cover what's going on in here. So please, guys, we have a lot of requests from people from different European, American, and so on countries, from journalists from these countries. So please be in contact with them. And if you wish to, please find new ways to tell the truth about what's going on. Find the new persons who will tell the world about our fight, who will tell the world about our problems, our needs, and so on. So I wrote a message to a friend of mine. She's really a nice friend of mine. She's a refugee from Russia. She left Russia long ago. She lives in the United States, and she's living in Arizona State. As I know, she's also, some kind of huge person in a podcast business. Uh, I wrote her a message asking her what can be done in such a way. What should I do to tell the story of our fight, to tell the story of our freedom fight to white white Western audience. So she somehow managed to include me in this journalist and podcasters letter, or I don't know how to call it. And she said to me, "You need to write down all you can do for a Western journalist and for people who are doing podcasts. Introduce yourself and left some context how with which people can contact you." So I made all of it, and I think in an hour or even less than an hour, Stevie wrote me and said, "Oh, we are ready to do. We are ready to do a podcast with you. We have some kind of team to work for you." So that's how all this started.
Fantastic. Wow. And the podcast episodes, which we'll get into in a minute, really cover a real breadth of experience, right? From barbecues to weddings to going out on patrol, and I think when people think about being in an active conflict, they don't, the picture of the full spectrum of your experience isn't always top of mind. And so for you to share the real daily aspects of it has been, just incredible for people to be able to know what it's like on the ground and to hear your experience. It's really been incredible. And the fact that it came together so quickly, I think sometimes when the message is important and when it's meant to be shared, everything just kind of, snaps into place. And it sounds like from both of you that's pretty much what happened, from the production standpoint and, getting on Apple in 6 hours, which, I mean, with Podbean, we host many, many podcasts, like over 600,000 podcasts, and we tell people it can take, up to a week to be approved by Apple to get on Apple Podcasts. It can take some time. And, just to have that vision and to really be, I think there is a vulnerability also with what you're sharing, because it's not always, this is the catchy headline, it's not always, this is what the news is telling you. It's this is my exact experience, right? Like you're sharing exactly what's going on for you on the ground. And yes, you're including the important parts of what's been going on, but you're also including the entire, I want to say like the roundness of your experience, like you fully filled it out, I think, for a lot of people. Stevie, yeah.
I just want to jump in there because I really think that it speaks to how good a journalist that Yuri is, the way that he's able to tell these stories in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember he gave me the first one, and I did not know what to expect when I said, "Hey, Yuri, I'll do this for you." And he sent me over the first file, and it was such a beautiful storytelling of why he joined the Territorial Defense Army in Ukraine and why he wanted to do this and why he wanted to defend his country and cast aside his life as a journalist and to defend Ukraine. And it very clearly, I think, when I saw his request, I thought, this is of historical significance. What Yuri's doing, I don't think has ever been done before. And the way that he is able to tell stories in such a succinct and rich way really speaks to how good he is, what he does.
Yes, absolutely. So, Yuri, please know, that for those of us that aren't there, it's something where we really see hear the full picture of the experience that you're in and that you're having. It's not a front line. It's a very complete picture. And you've spoken on, I want to talk a little bit about the episodes now, because you've spoken about a real breadth of subjects, right? From a literal wedding,
Yeah.
And you mentioned quite a few times going out on patrol. So, beforehand you were a journalist, and were around military, but weren't, directly in a unit, and now you're part of the Territorial Defense Army. So what does an average patrol look like for you?
Today's episode is dedicated to working as a opposite guy, because for years I've been in Middle East and Central Asia, the guy who was trying to do something that guys on the checkpoints prohibited me to do. But now I'm the guy, who prohibits something to foreign journalists to do on the checkpoints. Yeah, we are working on the checkpoints. We are working on the patrols. You see, we have, even in Kyiv, we have a lot of when I'm telling that Russia is worse than ISIS. I can also tell that Russia uses the methods of ISIS. So ISIS had sleeping cells all around the Western world and not Eastern world, and even in Europe, maybe in New Zealand and Australia and so on. So Russia also made, before the war, the huge net of sleeping cells in Ukrainian cities. So the main mission of the people from territorial defense units who are working inside, who are serving inside Kyiv, is to find, detect, and fight these saboteurs, these persons from sleeping cells of Russian gangsters. So the main mission is to check cars, to check pedestrians, to look at their papers, to talk to them, and trying to detect if they're nervous, if they're trying to hide something, if they're if they're speaking not so local, with not a local accent, or using some kind of not Ukrainian words, or so. We need to check and detect all the potential and real saboteurs, and to give them to counterintelligence services. Of course, time after time, it is fighting erupting on the checkpoints or right on the streets. Sometimes people call us to one of our headquarters, or to another of our quarters, call us and tell, we think that in our house or close to our house there are some kind of enemy activity, or we think that our neighbors who moved to this flat close to us only weeks before the war, we think that they are Russian spies. Please come here and find out. So a lot of people in territorial defense units are literally going, door to door, speaking to people, arresting the people who have, for example, some kind of not so well documents, or who have forged documents. So this is everyday activity to fight and to find, to search, and to fight the Russian spies, Russian saboteurs inside Ukrainian cities and towns.
Wow. Okay. And 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 that's daily, is that right?
Yeah, it's daily. Of
Okay.
course, it's all around the clock. The people are doing this work all around the clock. I told you that there are tens of thousands people in territorial defense units, tens of thousands.
Yeah.
In
So
every
are
city,
you
in every town, in every region, there are a lot of such people.
right? Are you at the checkpoints? I mean, daily for you personally, is that more where you're stationed?
Uh, I work, as a fixer, as a guide for a foreign journalist, for
Yeah,
a
which is
part of.
important to share what's happening.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. For a part of the day, and other part of the day, I'm on the positions with my comrades from our platoon. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, one of the reasons I started to do podcasts, it's first of all, I cannot make any pictures or videos, because we can't do anything which can disclose our
Put
positions
anyone at risk.
to
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I
Yes.
can't make photos. I can't make videos. I can, I can only tell
Yeah.
about what's going on around me. So that's why I started to making podcasts. That's why I decided to do it in such a way. Even now, I can't talk to you from our positions. Even now, I'm on a leave. I need to leave my positions. I came to my former radio station. It's in the state of, if it's in the state of evacuation now. I'm sitting in a studio which I was working for a few years in the studio,
Wow.
but now it's almost empty. I can show you the studio in here. There are some people still inside of this, this radio station. They are working all around the clock, day by day. Some of the girls with whom I worked here during the peacetime, it was not so long ago. But now they are evacuating
Yeah.
for another part of Ukraine. So I can show you this.
Wow. And this is the radio station where you worked for
Yeah, this
several years in
yeah
Kyiv.
this
Okay.
this is one of our studios inside this radio
Wow.
station. Yeah.
And how does it feel? I mean, what's the feeling being in that space, somewhere you went daily, to work at your job? What is the feeling that you get being in the same space, but having so many things removed and knowing that you don't know when you're going to come back?
I left my home uh, a month ago, and since then I've never been at my place.
Yeah.
It's on the other bank of the Dnipro River, so it's not so easy to get there for me while I'm in the army. But this radio station is really close from our positions. Uh, mm, so for me, it's almost like coming home. It's almost like a returning for 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 the times before the war, like returning in the times, in a peaceful and calm times. So yeah, when I'm here, I'm feeling myself almost at home. Not really at home, but almost at home.
Right. So there's that sense of familiarity because this is a space
Yeah,
you've spent so much time in.
even in this situation when is
Wow.
everything is moving, everything is sending in other parts of Ukraine, everything is remounting and so on.
Absolutely. And I think it's something where that sense of comfort is, or that sense of familiarity is so comforting. And it sounded like, and when we were preparing for the interview, I didn't want to ask any specifics because of security concerns. And I love what you said about as a podcast, there's no visuals. I think I saw a TikTok about somebody accidentally revealing a location for the army that became a target because of that kind of thing. So it's definitely something that is a risk. So I think it's such an important aspect that you mentioned about specifically the podcast. And then when you mentioned the familiarity and how comforting that is, that you can't be at your house now, but it sounds like maybe some of the other people, that are serving in the Territorial Defense Army are able to stay in their houses at night. And
No,
no,
no.
okay,
We should spend nights only in barracks. But if someone is, is living close to his barracks, someone is living to his position,
yeah,
he can, from time to time, he can sometimes get, get the permission to go where, to wash his clothes, to take the
right,
shower,
okay,
to change clothes. But with the option that he will take some of his comrades with him.
yeah,
So you can't
yeah,
go,
okay,
alone. You need to help your colleagues. You need to help your comrades to also to take shower, to wash their clothes, and so on.
right, absolutely. And in terms of seeking out things that are familiar, is there anything else that people, have been finding comfort in that have joined the Territorial Defense Army? Anything that's familiar that has brought comfort that you've noticed within your unit or the Army in general?
For this month, I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag right on the floor, and I can't remember. I can't remember the times when I was sleeping in the bed. And I can't. I can barely remember. Hardly remember the times before the army. So I can tell that people all around me were becoming my friends, were becoming almost my family. So of course, we are trying to help each other. Of course, we are trying, to comfort each other. Of course, we are talking about nice things. We are joking on each other. We are trying to make some kind,
Keep your
of
spirits up. Yeah.
yeah, of almost, of almost home atmosphere. Uh, it's really, really hard to me to explain it for people outside, this world. I can't explain it in a in a simple words, but in a few words. And the long story I can tell you also, because I think it take me about a couple of hours to try to explain what's going. But trust me, yeah, everything is all right. Everything is is great inside the territorial defense units. Everything is great inside police units and army units, and everyone is ready and to protect the country, to defend our freedom. And we are, I told you, we are, just like one family. It's true. It's not, it's not like, some kind of figure of speech. It's true. It's really is.
Wow. Well, I'm going to reintroduce you. For everyone joining us here live and for the replay, we're joined today by Yuriy Matsarsky and Stevie Manns. Yuri is a Ukrainian journalist based in Kyiv who spent the majority of his career covering war zones and has teamed up with Stevie Manns, a podcast consultant and producer based out of the US, to create the podcast Fighting for Ukraine that documents Yuri's daily experience on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. And we do have a chat here, so if anybody does have any questions for Yuri and for Stevie, drop them in. And I want to talk a little bit more about, when you started the podcast, it was really to share the daily experience that you're having on the ground. And as the episodes have continued to come out, it seems that there is not necessarily like a specific thread or narrative, but it really documents your experience. And I think this question is for both of you. What is your hope for the work that you're sharing? Hopefully when there's peace in Ukraine, for documenting what's happening and your experience on the ground, because it is so unique. To be candid, it's such a unique way of sharing your experience with the world. Do you have any intention for sharing the work, and how it will be maybe not perceived in future, but how it will document what's going on for the future? So Yuri, let's start with you, and then we'll jump in with Stevie.
For sure, I will make some kind, of hiatus in the next few days because I wouldn't be able to write and I wouldn't be able to have even my phone with me. But I really want to continue after my returning to Kyiv, after my returning to my barracks. I really want to continue this work because I think it's really necessary to try to explain people in the West what's going on in Ukraine in reality. First of all, we still need your aid. First of all, we still need, the help from the Western countries, from Western governments, and from Western people. This was my main goal when I'm starting this podcast to explain people what's going on and to make people wish to help us even more because we are under the threat from the Russian Federation. We're still targeting Ukrainian cities and towns. We're still killing civilians every day in dozens. So I really hope that in a not a constant future, I really hope that maybe in a next week or in a few days I can tell you a story about the new anti-rocket systems or the new American or European planes which is coming to Ukrainian army to protect the skies and to protect to defend people in Kharkiv, in Mariupol, in Sumy, in Kherson, and so on. We will not use these weapons for for targeting Russian civilians, Russian cities or Russian regions. We only needed to protect our civilians. So I think I'll continue to cover the stories about what's going on in Ukraine even after our victory, because the victory is only, I think, it would only the beginning of the total rebuilding of Ukraine, because we have such losses right now. We have such damages right now. We have minefields. I think we can compare it with Belgium. The territory of minefields in Ukraine, it's like Belgium or even larger than Belgium. So I think it will last for maybe for months, but I think it can last for years.
Yes, absolutely. I think, with the conflict and the nature of it being, so violent and so intense, I think also when you mentioned Kharkiv and how in 2 weeks there was more bombing than the entire
it's about
Second World
Kharkiv.
War.
It's
Right.
Kharkiv. It's not. It was in Kharkiv.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned that earlier. Just the sheer volume of it. Yeah, it's definitely something where so much has changed in such a short period of time. Stevie, I want to direct this question to you as well, because being, across the world in the United States and seeing the experience that you're having on the ground documented as it creates almost a body of work. Yeah.
I think the significance of what Yuri is doing can't be understated. I remember when I was at school and I was learning history, and you're seeing all of these black and white photos of World War II and World War I, and you're like, when you're that age, you're wondering how on earth it is relevant for you. And I think what Yuri is doing is making history real. He's making it human. He's making a connection with somebody. And podcasting is such an intimate way to make that connection. You're hearing stories from Yuri, a real person. You're hearing not only his stories, but those of the people that are around him. You're hearing about his daughter's birthday that he missed. You're hearing about the plea of an old lady who experienced World War II and who is probably going to, she will see out her life in the next few years. She came into it with the Nazis bombing, and she's seeing it out with the Russians bombing. You're hearing about a wedding this week. You're hearing all of these really human stories. And I really hope, one, that it helps people to connect with the conflict. And I think conflicts around the world can feel far away, and I think this is a way for people to really connect to it and to really get involved with the politics of something that is not near. But Yuri reminds us every day that this is near. This might be in Ukraine, but the political ramifications and the geopolitical ramifications of this are far-reaching, and it does affect everyone. So I certainly hope that people find a way to connect to that, as well as the historical significance of it for years to come.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, what you mentioned, it's definitely something where we're watching world history unfold very quickly and in near real time. Yuri, when we were coordinating this interview, it was we were originally going to schedule it further in the future, and we realized like this is so imminent, and it's such a time right now that is, so the landscape is changing so quickly, that it's important to document things as they happen, as soon as they happen, that kind of thing. And the way that you've done it is just incredible. So thank you again for sharing this work. I want to ask one more question, but before I do, I will mention that you've created a GoFundMe crowdfunding campaign, and we'll post the link here in the comments. It's in the description for both the YouTube Live and the LinkedIn description of the event. So if you want to support Yuri's GoFundMe crowdfunding campaign, the link is directly there. And we've had podcasters ask us how they can support. So what are the different ways that people can support you and the people of Ukraine? What do people on the ground need? And as we're coming from a community of podcasters, is there anything specific that podcasters can do?
I think the main thing the podcasters, the journalists, the producers can do is to talk as much as possible about what's going on in Ukraine, to find people from Ukraine who can tell their stories, find people who can describe what's going on every day in Ukraine. It's really important for us in here, and I think it's really different for all the people in the free world, because it's not just a war of Russia against Ukraine. It's a war against, it's a war against democracy. It's a war against freedom. So this is our common war. We can't, stay aside one from another. So it's really, really important for people who are, involved in such a thing as podcasting or journalism, to understand it and to make our people understand it. It's not, the war about surviving of Ukraine. It's a war about surviving the democracy and the freedom, at least in Europe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's something where podcasters as a community, we can share, we can speak about what's going on. We can share your podcast specifically. So I think that's a great answer, honestly.
And if I may just add there, I would, a huge thank you to Jordan Harbinger, who interviewed Yuri last week and has been really helpful about promoting Yuri's work, the podcast, and helping with the GoFundMe as well. People like Jordan to get him to highlight the podcast and feature it has been wonderful, and likewise with other podcasters as well. Thank you very much, and we really appreciate spreading the message.
Absolutely. I think this work is so important, and the way that you're sharing the full spectrum of your experience so generously with us. Thank you so much. And it's something where I think as more and more people hear about what's going on the ground, I think it really adds a human element. Because when we see things on the news, it's definitely different than when you hear someone's voice about what's specifically going on for them. Being at a wedding on the front lines, or missing your daughter's birthday, because those are very human experiences. And I think there is a general lack of humanity sometimes in the way that we describe conflict and war. So I think that your perspective is so unique and important. I'll just ask our last question, and then I'll read a couple of comments, and then I'll read our outro. So our last question is, what are you both hopeful for Yuri, I think maybe in terms of what's going on in Ukraine and the peaceful future that you envision. Yeah, what are you hopeful for?
I hope for a returning of all the occupied territories. I hope that very soon the war would be over and we can return to our civilian professions. We can continue to do what we are used to do. I really hope to see all my family again in Ukraine, and I really want to hug my daughter. I saw her last time more than a month ago. She's a refugee. My parents is a refugees. I want all the refugees to come back. There are more than 10 millions. There are more than 10 millions of Ukrainians left their homes. Almost half of these people are right now in the foreign countries, just like my daughter and like my parents. More than half of all the children in Ukraine left their houses, more than a half of all the children of all the nation, left their houses. It must be stopped, So I really want all these people to come back to our homeland and to build our prosperous, rich, and happy Ukraine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think for everybody out there, I think many people have seen the footage of people leaving the country, and evacuating. And from my understanding, I believe that Ukrainian men who are of adult age weren't permitted to leave. Is that correct?
No, the people, all the men who can serve in the army are not permitted to leave. Only women, kids, and elderly men can leave Ukraine. So the largest part, the hugest part of the refugees is women and kids.
Right, absolutely. And just hearing that, you know that the overall landscape of the population has drastically changed. So I think to be together again and to be whole in that way, and the way that you've expressed it is so important. Because when we think about demographics of a society, no matter where we're coming from, to have specific demographics leave in that way must really just change. First of all, from a population standpoint, there's less people, but also there's less children. Absolutely. Well, we do have a couple of comments. One from Sandy is excellent use of podcasting to share powerful, important stories. And Yuri, your reports have been sobering and impactful. Stevie, you are wonderful to be a lifeline to bring these stories to the rest of the world. So I think a lot of us out there are really appreciative for the work that you're doing. And we're so grateful you're able to join us here today. I'll just read our brief outro for everyone who's joined us here live. And if you're joining for the replay, we're here today with Yuriy Matsarsky and Stevie Manns. Yuri is a Ukrainian journalist based in Kyiv who spent the majority of his career covering war zones and has teamed up with Stevie Manns, a podcast consultant and producer based out of the US, to create the podcast Fighting for Ukraine that documents Yuri's daily experience on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so grateful that you could share your story and speak about the podcast Fighting for Ukraine and the experience that you've been able to share here with us today. For everyone who's joined us, thank you again for joining Storytelling Podcast Week, brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetization platform and home to over 600,000 podcasts. So if you'd like to start your own podcast, you can go to podbean.com today. And if you'd like to support Yuri, either by listening and sharing to Fighting for Ukraine or donating to his GoFundMe, all of those links are in the notes of the live stream here and the recording, whether you're watching via YouTube or via LinkedIn. So thank you all so much for joining us here today. And Yuri, we wish you well. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma Jean.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stevie.